So all of these things, every single one of these things is a very interesting graph over at this the website, equalitytrust.org.uk, that compares health and social problems. In other words, it maps all of these things: life expectancy, math and literacy. There's school dropout rates, infant mortality, homicide rate, gun deaths, imprisonment, the number of people in prison, teenage birth rates, and also sexually transmitted diseases, trust in a society, people answering the question, yes, I can trust strangers, obesity, mental illness, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, use of psychiatric pharmaceuticals, and social mobility, the ability to move higher than the income class into which you were born. That all of these things have absolutely nothing to do with how rich the country is. The U.S. is worse of all the countries in the world on all of these things, and yet we are one of the richest nations in the world. Portugal is second worst on all of these things, and yet they are one of the poorer countries in Europe at an average income of around $18,000 a year. We've got $44,000 a year. Why is the U.S. the richest and Portugal one of the poorest, both on the worst end of the scale in this list of things that I just laid out? Because the U.S. and Portugal are two of the most unequal societies. In other words, we're the two societies, along with the United Kingdom, which is also in the middle. They've got an average income of around $28,000, and they're among the three worst in terms of all of those things that I just listed. The difference between the poorest 20% and the richest 20% in these three countries is the greatest of anywhere else on earth. And therefore, we have the worst outcomes in these areas. It's got nothing to do with being rich. We're rich. Portugal's poor. We're both having a terrible time. Japan, for example, has an average income of $28,000. That's kind of moderately rich. They're the best of all the major developed countries in terms of all of these things that I listed: life expectancy, math and literacy, college graduation, high school graduation, infant mortality, homicide rates, imprisonment, teenage birth, trust, obesity, mental illness, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, social mobility. Japan is the best. They're also the most equal society among all the fully developed worlds. The most. Now, how did they get there? This was an issue that Karl Marx struggled with, because I think that we've always known as humans intuitively that we are wired to be cooperators, not competitors. We are wired to be collaborators. We are wired to work together. In fact, it turns out, chimps are incredibly hierarchical and very violent towards each other, male chimps in particular. Bonobos, or bonobos, you can pronounce it either way. Bonobos, another kind of monkey that's closely related to us, or ape that is closely related to us, are not at all violent. Chimps resolve conflicts by violence and dominance. Bonobos resolve conflicts literally by sex, by making love, or by touching, or by working things out socially. That part of, and this was a real revelation to me, this very recent research, that part of our DNA, which has to do with how we interact with other people socially, that part of our DNA that drives our social interactions, is identical to the bonobo DNA and different from the chimp DNA. We're wired like bonobos, which is why, in that realm of conflict, which is why when societies pass through the thresholds of crisis, which is the essence of my new book, Threshold, The Crisis of Western Culture, when societies pass through these thresholds where their environment crashes, their population gets so high that they start experiencing famine and starvation, their economic and political systems collapse, those being the three thresholds that we're really facing right now in a big way and in a terrible way. When societies pass through these thresholds and come out the other side still alive, they become egalitarian societies. You see that right across the board in Aboriginal and Indigenous societies all over Earth. And that's what's happened with these societies that came through World War II and said, how do we redo society? Let's make our society more equal. Japan, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Spain, Canada, France. They are the most equal of the fully developed countries, and they have the longest life expectancy, the best high school graduation, college graduation, the lowest infant mortality, the lowest homicide rate, the lowest imprisonment rate, the lowest teenage birth rates, the best trust, the lowest obesity rates, the best mental health, and the highest social mobility. Marx said we have to do it by forcibly having the government take money from the rich and give it to the poor. I submit to you that there's a middle ground, which is building a strong social safety net at the bottom and high taxation at the top. This is called social democracy, and it's how it's practiced in Europe, and we can do it too.